Hi everyone, welcome to Mental Health Awareness Month firstly, and welcome Illeana Cocotos, obviously someone that has been with me through this journey, someone that I trust so much, someone that I refer my clients to, and someone that I actually speak about really often. How are you, Illeana?
I'm good, Jennifer. Always good to be here. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time. As everyone knows, I have started my own company, IMPASSION, and Illeana has been a part of that journey in a massive way. Not only obviously in the role as psychologist that she plays, but someone that also I can rely on, I can talk to, and I can trust. And I think that is really important for us in this journey. If everyone obviously doesn't know, the first time that I went to go see Illeana was when I was going through a really hard time. I was going through a bit of a depression space. I'd been robbed. I didn't know essentially where I was coming or going. And yeah, I just felt deep anxiety. And Illeana really did help me. So when it comes to obviously Mental Health Awareness Month, I am a person that really does take it seriously. I do actually think that mental health awareness should be every day, because it is something that plagues our society. I think it is something that is actually gotten worse during Corona. Maybe not even worse. Maybe we actually identify it more because we're around people so much. So Illeana, for me, like how has Mental Health Awareness Month been for you? Like, have people been reaching out more? Like, what is your experience of it?
So Jennifer, thanks first of all just for the kind words. I really do appreciate it. Look, it's been really busy. I think, anxiety levels are up, depression is definitely up. I think COVID has a lot to do with it. I think the isolation in the beginning, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're obviously going to talk about relationships today, mental health within relationships. So, community does, improve our mental health, especially amongst the elderly. So, when that was taken away, definitely, people became depressed, isolated. So, as you say, mental health is a huge thing. I don't think we realized how much it impacts on everything. It impacts on our work, it impacts on our social life, it impacts on our physical health. So hopefully today's talk will help people just to break, I think, the stigma around, mental health. And that's obviously what Mental Health Month is all about. And just help people to identify, mental health issues in relationships. Hopefully this talk is going to give them a little bit more insight and just help people to become more comfortable, I think, talking about mental health. And just if we can help in any way,
Yeah.
I think, we all need to do our bit.
I think that's even for me. So for me, I've always said that you don't really get to understand what someone's going through unless you've kind of gone through it yourself. Like, I know when we were sitting and we were chatting and I was kind of explaining to you how I was feeling personally, and you told me, Jennifer, I think you're depressed. I think it was probably one of the biggest moments of my life, because depression was weakness for me. Depression was I'm not depressed. Depressed people can't get out of bed. Depressed people can't do all of that. And that's what we're going to get into a bit later, the symptoms that you see. Because me not getting out of bed and me not being able to speak and me not being able to communicate, I just saw that as burnout. I just saw that as feeling really tired and stressed. But when I came to you, you were like, you're depressed. And I'm not saying that you need to go on any sort of medication, but like you kind of made me feel comfortable to know that if I'm feeling that way, firstly, it's okay. And secondly, sometimes we do need things like friends, family, exercise, anything that we need to get us better. And I remember one of the biggest things that you said to me is that I was always looking for a solution to be better. I was like, okay, I'm going to exercise and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And you would say to me, stop putting so much pressure on yourself, because that's how I would always deal with stress. But when it's depression, you obviously deal with it on a clinical level and you understand it, and you know that by me putting more pressure on myself, I probably would have gotten worse.
Absolutely. Okay, so when we're very critical, we push ourselves, and often it's that critical voice, which, as you say, make us feel, even worse.
Mm.
So it's very important when we're depressed, to be able to acknowledge it, to embrace it, to be kind to ourselves. There are days, like you said, you don't feel like getting out of bed. It's not a weakness, but your body is telling you something, and we need to learn to listen to our bodies. We need to treat them with care. And if we need, like you said, to go on medication, sometimes we need medication. Sometimes it just helps because we cannot function. So sometimes it's a combination of medication, it's a combination of therapy, but it's about, acknowledging it and not being so tough on yourself, changing that voice in our head, which often, can even come from childhood, that we so hard, we push ourselves and we just reach a point where our body says, you know what, no more,
Yeah.
please just listen to me. So I think that's really important, that we have to listen, we have to realize that it's not a weakness. And I think when we go through it, it's incredibly debilitating. And remember, there are different levels of depression.
Yeah.
They're milder forms and more severe forms. They're people that need to be hospitalized. And I think when you go through it, I think you can show compassion to other people, because
Mm.
until you've really gone through it, you can't really understand. And often we judge, and we don't have a clue what people are going through. So I think if we can grow from the experience, then we can reach out, we can help other people who often go through a really dark space.
Yeah, I think for me, probably the hardest thing, like, yes, I never really had people that were hard on me. I was always hard on myself. Like, I always had to be the best. I was always the helper, never the helpless. I was always the person that was there for people. And I think when you kind of crumble, you lose your identity, right? So when you are a person that, let's say, for example, in a financial or a professional space that is doing world work and you can't do world work anymore, or you are the life of the party and you can't do that anymore, you lose your identity and then you step into a place of shame. And I think that is probably one of the worst things to feel, is that when you're actually feeling all these things, like, I know I deal with so many people, and because I've gone through it, which for me is the biggest blessing, obviously, when you come out of it, I will say to someone, I think you're experiencing anxiety. Like, obviously, I'm not a psychologist and I'll always refer, but it is also up to people around you to be honest with you and say, it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel depressed, because people think depression is just feeling sad all the time. And it's actually
Yeah.
not. Like, sometimes, like, I know when I felt depressed, I felt numb. I felt like I couldn't speak. I wasn't sad. It's weird. Like, I was never, ever, there was never a day where I was like, oh my word, I'm feeling sad. But I felt like I was just like a ghost lingering with no purpose, no anything. You kind of like lose your identity. And you see that a lot of people that come to see you start to do that in their professional, social, and personal lives. Like, they actually don't know, they have no purpose. So they feel like, why am I even on this earth, kind of thing.
Look, it's a very dangerous space to be in, because, I mean, you spoke about feeling numb. Often
Mm,
people disconnected.
mm,
They then lose hope. And when we lose hope, that's a very, very dangerous space to be in.
yeah.
That's when people have suicidal thoughts. They have no hope, they see no future. So as you say, depression doesn't always manifest, in sadness. In men, it could be agitation, anger. In teenagers, being rebellious, being very, very irritable. So I think it's important to be able to identify all those different symptoms. I just wanted to ask you something, Jennifer, because you kind of alluded to it, that you were always the person who kind of, was there for other people. So if we look at it in relationships, because I think this is quite an important dynamic. If you're in a relationship, with, with whether it is a romantic relationship with friends, if you always feel like you're the person, that has to be there, that has to lift that person up. If you could speak from a personal experience of what eventually that does to you, I think it would be quite helpful for the people that are listening, because I think we need to speak about that, because that often happens, in relationships.
Yeah. And that is essentially, so this year I've actually realized so much about myself. So for me, I find self-awareness is probably the hardest thing to get to. But when you get there, it's actually so hard to like switch it off, because you're aware. Sometimes you can become too aware. So what I would always do is that because I had a fixing nature, because I was a helper, because I was someone that always was there for people, that always was the fixer, right? Like, and I genuinely, like, I had to get honest with myself. I had to genuinely say to myself, Jennifer, you are a person. So I was the type of person that always kind of, and I figured this out about myself, and it's probably one of the hardest things to realize, that I actually had a need to be needed. If I wasn't helping someone, fixing them with a problem, helping them with something, I genuinely felt like I served no value. Okay, at 30 years old was the first time that I actually realized this. Do I realize that it's good in a certain space? Yes. So in my legal space and in my business space, it is an impeccable thing. Do I realize that I need to step back from it and not absorb people's energies, not take responsibility for them 100%? And have I also realized that people are not going to give you what you give them most of the time? Not because they don't want to, it's just because they don't have capacity sometimes, right? And because I am a person that is grounded, I'm stable, I'm kind of like a tree. Even if I am spinning around, I'm still stable. Do you know what I mean? Even if I am feeling anxiety, and you've seen this, like when I felt very bad anxiety, I still have a plan. I'm still stable. I'm not like all over the place. And people that are unstable are going to be attracted to stable people, because that is good for them. You're helping them, and you're there. And what I've realized in my relationships is that I have to set boundaries, right? When something is taken from me and there's no reciprocal exchange, as much as I love that person, as much as I respect that person, I get to choose them. I get to choose to love them from a distance, right? Because I've started to also trust my intuition and my gut. And I think a lot of us don't do that. I think a lot of us kind of take it and they go, oh, it means nothing. But when my gut starts to tell me something's wrong, I take a step back and I go, why am I trying to fix this person again? Why am I trying to help this person? Because it's also it's a really good nurturing trait, but it's also a toxic trait of mine, and I'm honest about it.
Very toxic. And can I ask you, what did it result in you feeling? Because I think this is what a lot of people feel, and we're going to obviously chat about it because I think it's very important in relationships. So over time, how would it make you feel?
So it would make me feel not stable, right? So that's probably the first thing to say, is that when, like, I've had a good relationship of 6 years where constantly I didn't feel anxiety. If we fought, we moved on. It was a very, very healthy relationship. There was communication, there was understanding. And then I stepped into other relationships that weren't so healthy. So it made me feel, firstly, on top of the world, and then like I was nothing. Then on top of the world, and then I was nothing. And then also shameful in a way, because I would say to myself, and also another thing that I've realized about myself is that I have this thing, and you identified it actually, where I would go, okay, I'm going to give you a chance, and then I'm going to cut you off, right? Because that was my power. That was like, I'm going to give you chances, but if you don't listen, I'm going to cut you off, which also isn't good. Just to cut people off but still allow them to untangle you and hurt you is also not healthy. So
Absolutely.
I would start to feel very shameful, because I would sit back and go, if someone does this to me one more time, or if they do this, I'm done. And I wouldn't be done, because I still cared about them. So I was setting these kind of expectations for myself, not being able to achieve them, but also knowing what the result would be. So I kind of was actually welcoming suffering, but because I had control of that suffering, it meant I had control, which also isn't good.
Definitely not. And I think it's very important to identify if we are in that caregiver role, okay, or that fixer role, if we are with somebody who has mental health issues, what we often tend to do, as you identified, is we fix them. You know, we do things for them, we enable them, we allow them to kind of get away with, you know, their dysfunctional behavior. And that's not a good thing, because what happens over time, I mean, as you say, initially you felt on top of the world. It was wonderful. You know, you got something out of it. There was a codependency. You got something out of it. They got something out of it. But what happens over time is you negate your own needs. You know, so you don't look after yourself. You allow somebody to mistreat you. And what you're also doing for them, you know, as much as you love them, you're giving them the message that they can't do certain things on their own. So it's actually not good for them either. And what eventually starts happening is you get frustrated, you know, as you say, you get frustration, you reach a point, okay, you withdraw, you know, there's tension in the relationship. You know, you're talking about trivial things, but you disconnect within the relationship. And this is where a lot of problems occur in relationships, you know, where the person who's in that caregiver role might turn to substances, you know, in an effort to just cope, to deal with things. They might, you know, have an affair. But it's not resolving the, you know, the problem in the marriage, and it's not healthy for either of you. So at this point, I think it is important, you know, to get help, either individually or either as, you know, as a couple, to say this is not functioning. You know, and often what often happens is when couples go into, you know, couples therapy, it's often at a crisis point. It's often when, like you said, this has been going on for a very, very long time. You know, and often that person who is in that fixer caregiver role is so frustrated that often they just want to exit. You know, it's reached a point where, you know, there probably is no hope in the relationship, and that is quite a dangerous point to be at. And also it can really lead to burnout. You know, if you're trying to fix a person all the time who has mental health issues, they've done studies, and the amount of burnout that person feels is actually the same as a psychiatric nurse who works in a psychiatric hospital looking after patients. That's the same amount of burnout. So it's not healthy for you, but
I
it
feel like you
certainly
also
is also
take
not
that energy
healthy.
on. Like I
Absolutely.
genuinely, I lived with someone with bipolar and depression, and I genuinely felt like that added so much, because I'm not a depressed person. I am not an anxious person. And I do really believe that your energy being around that person, and I'm not saying that anyone shouldn't date someone that has those kind of disorders or whatever, but that person should be in treatment or should be in therapy, because I
Absolutely.
know that
It's not your job.
it's not your job. It's not your job. And also it's not, you don't have that capacity. Like, as much as I have capacity to speak to people, obviously, because I deal with divorces, I deal with people going through trauma, I deal with people going through a lot, but I've also learned that it's not my place to like help them in that realm. That's why I refer them to you, or I refer them to a psychiatrist, or I refer them to a space where they can have therapy, because I'm not a therapist, right? I care about people and I want people to be okay. But I've started to realize that when I started to care so much, I would drain myself to a point that I wouldn't be able to get out of bed the next day, because I would have literally taken on all their energy, and everything that I wanted to do in my company, I was unable to do. So that's why I also believe in tribes. I believe when you're going through something really hard in life and you're hurting and you're healing at the same time, and you're trying to undo toxic cycles and all of this, you need a tribe, like a psychologist. People are so like, even when I came to you the first time, I'd never been to a psychologist in my life before, right? You have to put your ego aside. You have to realize that
It's
if you're
tough.
not, it's really, like, I promise you, if it wasn't for the partner that I was with, and I always see good in every space, he said to me, you have to go. And I said, yeah. And it was probably the best thing that had ever happened to me, because it allowed me to also realize that, as much as, and I was speaking to a friend of mine actually yesterday, a speaker friend, and she wrote a book on forgiveness. Her father was murdered in the apartheid regime, and she wrote a book basically of forgiving the person that murdered her father and meeting him, and this whole journey. And we were talking about trauma yesterday, and I said to her, in our businesses, we do so well with people, but our relationships are an absolute mess. Why? And we were kind of going back and forth, and I said to her, I said, maybe we date these damaged people because it makes us feel like we're not damaged, right?
Mm.
And when I came to you, I realized I was a little bit broken. I was traumatized by certain things. But because I'd always dated someone that was more than me, I didn't really see it, because I'd always go, it's not me, it's them. It's not me, it's them. But when you're standing by yourself, you have to, that's why we're saying, yeah, are you going to heal, or are you going to continuously hurt yourself? Because we also hurt
Mm.
ourselves. We don't only hurt other people.
Absolutely, because there's something in you, as you spoke about, that wanted, to fix, your partner. So until you heal that, you're going to be repeating that pattern. And can I ask you, Jennifer? I mean, you alluded to the fact that it impacted on your wanting to get out of bed. Okay,
Mm.
like you said, you absorbed so much, of the energy. And that really affects your mood. It zaps you of your energy. So they have found a correlation, okay, between, if you're dating somebody who has mental health issues, it can affect your mental health as well. If you're taking on that role, if you're trying to help them, trying to, save them, it's going to impact on your mental health. So I think it's important to get help. If you are in a situation where you yourself or the person that you're dating have mental health issues, for you both to get individual therapy, to get therapy as a couple, because there is hope. Sometimes, I see clients who date people who've got mental health issues, and they take on this caregiver role, and they become absolutely exhausted. By the time they come to see me, they feel trapped in this relationship. They think to themselves, is this how my life is going to be? So rather than letting it get to that point, you know, there are ways to cope, to deal with it. But as you said, it's important to identify also our cycles in that. Are we going to heal from it? Are we going to change? Because if we change, we can change generations to come. But if we don't, all that we do is that one day when we have children, unfortunately, we pass down those toxic cycles. And for
You.
7 generations afterwards,
Mm.
those cycles continue. And that's what we see, generational trauma and toxicity.
And that's, I think, what, for me, why I love doing what I do right now. And I've created this divorce online course, because I kind of try to show people that you can't be in the legal realm unless you're healing from it, right? Because if you're angry, or you're hurtful, or you're hurt, or you're resentful, or you're not actually healing properly, what generally happens is that you actually become the person that you hate. So you become the narcissist, you become the enforcer, you become the person that is so bad. Like I've always said to myself, I never ever want to get to a point that I allow people to take advantage of me so much that I actually become the horrible person. Like I actually become the one that just cuts people off, that is cold, that is ugly, because that becomes my shield to protect myself, right? Like, and this is what I'm learning even in this journey right now. I'm learning that when I'm communicating with people, whether it's friends or relationships or business partners, if it doesn't feel good and it doesn't empower me and it doesn't add value to my soul, my mind, my body, and all of that, I get to say no, full stop. I get to don't have to explain myself. I don't have to go, oh, but they're an amazing person. Because like I once looked at myself in the mirror and I'm like, Jennifer, are you trying to convince yourself of this, or are you trying to convince other people? And I realized I was trying to convince myself of it, because like as human beings, we never ever want to acknowledge that we loved someone that's a monster, or we loved someone that lied or deceived us or treated us badly. That attacks our ego. That attacks every part of who we are. Like that we loved someone and we gave someone everything, that's actually not a nice person, right? And some people you don't have to be with, and some people you can set boundaries and you can literally go, I love you, but you're not for me. That has been like I'm learning that now, and it's probably one of the hardest things, because I needed to choose myself over someone else.
I think that's important, okay, to identify when do we kind of stay in this relationship? When can we work it, and when has it become so toxic that,
Yeah.
as you say, it's not good for our mental health? Often, even if we've got children in a relationship, often people stay in relationships because they think of the children, they don't want to go through a divorce. But I think if it's really toxic, if there's violence, if there's abuse, you're not expected to stay in that kind of relationship because, as you said, what does it do to you? As much as you can switch off and try to deal with it, it's a really toxic, environment. And sometimes we have to make that hard decision. And we have to, exit, that relationship. And it's not always good for the children, to see that. We often think that, they can endure, all these, toxic
No.
cycles and they're not going to be, affected, but they actually are affected. They're affected long terms in terms of their mental health. And what happens is that they see that this cycle of abuse is a normal cycle. And so what will often happen is that they will choose partners who will repeat that cycle. So as hard as it is, as you say, sometimes it's the toughest decision that you have to make. But sometimes you have to think of your mental health and you have to think of your children's mental health. And maybe certain situations, there needs to be, a separation. And as you say, if you can approach that, legal process, in an amicable way as best as you can. It's how you choose to deal with this difficult situation. So
Yeah.
I think you have to draw a line. You have to set up boundaries. You have to decide what you can deal with and just what is not good for you.
I think that's probably the hardest thing to kind of deal with. And I know for me, that's why I had that toxic trait of going, I'll take, and then I'll cut, right? Like the thing is though, I could also change the narrative. I don't have to take and take and take. I can also be like, okay, I'll try more, I'll try. Because also like regret is the worst thing in the world. You never want to leave a situation. And that's why I implore people to trust their gut, because if I actually left a situation where my gut was telling me to leave, and I allowed my gut to guide me and my intuition to guide me, probably would have done certain things. Obviously, I don't have any regrets in anything that I've done, because I do feel that even though you've suffered, when you learn lessons, it does matter. But I think the biggest thing for people in toxic relationships, especially when it comes to children, it might not, like, and I have a lot of parents say this to me, doesn't even affect them, they're not even doing anything now. Yeah, it doesn't affect kids now, but it affects, they turn into really damaged adults, and then I date them. So like, we need to get to a point that yes, it might not be affecting your kid now. Children are resilient, right? They are resilient as absolutely anything. You can put a child in uh, uh, in the middle of war, and they will still find a way to laugh or find a butterfly or find something, that because they just flow with energy. But what happens is that as they get older, they have those toxic cycles, and you're kind of showing them what love is, and it's a problem.
100%. Okay. And they've actually done studies. I mean, where children and adolescents have gone to clinics to receive help. Okay, the most significant factor, of the symptoms that they display, even at that time, are all family related. There's conflict, there's attachment issues, there's fighting that goes on. So we mustn't think that they're immune. I think we tell ourselves stories, it doesn't affect them, or they're little, or they're babies. Of course it affects them. It does long term, it affects their mental health, even in terms of their, their possibility of working one day, or their education levels. It all does affect them long term. So as you say, we all have a responsibility to look after them and to see what is best for them. So we mustn't think that it doesn't affect them.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
and
just as humans, we just kind of create a narrative for ourselves to make ourselves feel better. And that's also why I started IMPASSION, because I sit with parents and I go, it's not okay, right? Like, you sitting here telling me, but he did this, so I'm going to do this. I'm like, I don't give, like, excuse my language, I don't give a shit about either of you. I actually care about your child, because that is the person that you've chosen to bring into this world, and you either heal and you sort your stuff out, or you don't. And that's why I've dedicated myself to making videos like this accessible to people for free and all of that, because unfortunately the law and psychology it is for people that do obviously have the funds to do it. And that's why these little things like Mental Health Awareness Month, where people do videos and all of that, to be honest, if you don't have the funds to see a psychologist, Google whatever you're feeling. I promise you there's a video out there that's going to help you. Read a book. Read, just start your healing process, because a lot of people will go, oh, I'm not going to psychologist because I can't afford it. Do you know, like, most of the healing that I've done has actually been from podcasts, from books, from videos, from all of that. Like, yes, I've come to see you, but I don't see you every single day or every single week. Do you know what I mean? So people need to
There are a
realize.
lot of resources, yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. And I think if somebody is really battling, I mean, there are health professionals that will make a plan. You know,
yeah,
there are government-owned entities which, you know, can help people. So people mustn't think that, you know, there's no help out there. And also, as you know, you spoke about, you know, you take often, you know, we do feel something in our gut. Something is a bit off. But often we can't identify those symptoms or those patterns, you know,
mm,
and often it's, you know, it feels like home for us, especially if we grew up in a home where there was fighting and there was conflict. We think that that's the norm.
mm.
So sometimes it can be very, very subtle. You know, sometimes a person can appear to be a very nice person, but they actually, you know, subtly they you know, manipulating you, or they're lying to you, or they're being deceitful, or they're abusing you. It's not always so obvious.
No, it's
And
not obvious.
sometimes we need that, you know, mental health professional to be able to identify and say, you know, this is not okay. Because I think often we, you know, we feel something in our gut, but we push it aside, you know, and we reach a point where, you know, we reach kind of crisis and breaking point. So sometimes we cannot even identify, you know, how toxic it is. It doesn't have to be overt. You know, sometimes it's that more subtle, those subtle behaviors that confuse us, and then we end up staying in it because, you know, they're a good person, they're a pillar of the community. And so sometimes we need, you know, someone on the outside, or as you say, a friend, a community, someone in the community to talk to, you know, to be able to act as a sounding board. Because to us it might feel normal, but it might be very damaging to us and we haven't even
Yeah.
realized it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. So for me, if you could give people three things essentially from this video that could help them and be okay, like, what would you give them?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is, you know, listen to your body. You know,
Mm,
if you are displaying certain symptoms, you know, so if you're just not yourself, if you're feeling numbed out, if you're feeling disconnected, if your sleep is affected, you know, if your appetite is affected, or you're just feeling flat, or you know, your mood is just not like it used to be, listen to your body, you know, seek help. Don't just ignore. Your body is telling you, and often the body is the first place that we feel it. So I would say listen to yourself. Second of all, I would say set boundaries. You know, in a relationship, you know, the need to look after somebody or to be the caregiver or the fixer is not healthy. Set boundaries, you know, look after yourself and practice, you know, self-care. Don't be critical, don't push yourself. Try and switch off that negative voice in your head. And then the third thing that I would say in a relationship, try and have realistic expectations. You know, not one person is going to fulfill all your emotional needs. So I think be realistic. You know, realize, as you say, that we live in a community. You know, we can draw on many people, you know, in the community. You know, people help us in different ways and feed different needs. And then I would also say work at it. I think relationships require a lot of work. You know, and often we see things in Hollywood and Bollywood and we think,
mm.
you know, everything is fantastic. And that's not real life. You know, real life is hard work, and relationships are hard work. And just reach out, get help if you need to. See someone, you know, speak to a friend, but never feel that you're alone. There's a lot of help out there.
No, I completely, like, all of those ones I know for me, I've started to implement in my life. Like, boundary setting has always been the hardest thing for me, because, and this is also what my friend and I were discussing, is that when you're such a strong woman and you're actually got capacity and you actually fine, like in a weird way, like you can take it on and you can do that, you still allow it. But when it's still not okay, just because I can handle it doesn't mean that it's okay. And someone said to me the other day, like, if you're a beam of light, or you are always positive, or you're like a healer, you're always going to attract people that need healing. So people like that are always going to come towards you. People like that are always like, if you are a person that is always going to be there, obviously the users are going to come and do that. And I think for me this year, I've kind of stepped out of that. And my three things is, the first thing is like, sit back and pause. And I think Corona allowed me to do that. I sat back and I paused and I looked at all the relationships that I had in my life. And I said to myself, I'm making a promise that I need a reciprocal exchange. Like, and when I say reciprocal exchange, sometimes it'll be 90%, 10%. Sometimes it's 70-30. I'm not saying 50-50, because 50-50 doesn't exist. Like, you can't say, well, if I give you this and you give me this. When I say a reciprocal exchange, is that you're not draining me. Like, we're connected, but we're not attached, right? I don't feel after a conversation or an engagement with you that I feel like you're draining me and you're just totally taking advantage of my kindness. And a lot of people do that, because no matter what, even if you've hurt me, I'll still be kind to you because that's who I am. But I also don't have to even engage with you. That's what I've also learned, is that I don't have to block you or cut you off. I don't have to be mean to you, but I also don't have to reply sometimes if I don't want to, right? And the people that love you and the people that understand you, I believe, will understand that. Like, and the people that don't, obviously their intentions for you weren't really pure. Um, and then the second one is obviously seek help and guidance. Like, as you said, if you're giving those feelings, or you're feeling tired, or you're feeling that, you don't even have to dedicate yourself to a full long time lifetime therapy session. Like, sometimes just going to a therapist once or twice can help what you're going through and allow you to build a toolbox to carry on. Like, it's, people think that once you're in therapy you're damaged and you're there forever. No, like, speak out, build your tribe, have people that help you. Like, I know for me, sometimes I need therapy with you, and sometimes I need to see my spiritual guide. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just also understanding what will serve you and what will help you. And sometimes I also just need to sit alone and write in my journal and self-reflect. So I think it's, and that's the third one, is reaching out. So whether it's reaching out to loved ones, whether it's reaching out to professionals, whether it's reaching out to the internet, podcasts, or anything like that, but also reaching out to yourself. Because and in my divorce course, there's a space where I talk about this, where I say, you don't have to always, like, the energy that you give to people when you're drained, see it and give it to yourself, right? Sit with yourself and make yourself dinner, journal, write, do whatever is going to kind of serve you. Because if you're in negative, like, you kind of have to see yourself as a bank account. If you're in negative 100,000 Rand in your business, what are you going to go do? You're going to go make 120,000 Rand, because that is your business. We don't do that with our souls. Like, when we're in negative energy, we don't do things to get us more energy, right? Like, so that's the thing. When I'm feeling like, am I feeling negative 10,000 Rand today in my energy? Yes. Okay. What's going to help me? This. I do it, and automatically I actually feel better. But that's also me being self-aware of who I am. It takes a lot of time to get there. And yeah, like, I think when it comes to this, people just need to reach out. People need to let go of shame. I promise you, every single person, whether they're famous, whether they're not, whether they look like they've got everything got together, something together, there's something going on in their life that is not good. So we need to stop seeing people as being these perfect, like, beings on a pedestal, because they're not. They just don't talk about it.
Look, the good and the bad news is that we all wounded, all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, if you're a professional, we all have childhood wounding.
Mm.
And so therapy mustn't be seen as, there's something wrong with you. And, we've got to break the stigma. And I think especially, because this is what this month calls us to do. We have to realize that we can grow, as a result of therapy. Otherwise, we live in we live a death sentence, a life sentence, where we carry our problems with us, we're too scared, and it's what we know and we're comfortable in that, but we don't realize how it actually restricts us. So we're all wounded. That's the great news, is that we can all grow, and there shouldn't be the stigma attached to it. But I think, as you so correctly said as well, if we are the type of people that want to fix other people, it's normally because we tend to negate our own, emotional needs. And so we're trying to put our energy into, somebody else. So when we realize that, and as you say, we practice that self-care, that nurturing, we're not going to be depleted, and just like we give that love to everybody else, it's important to put those boundaries up. And as you said, if somebody doesn't respect that, that's not about you. If somebody has a problem with boundaries, when you say no, then they're probably not the people you want to be with. We have to look after ourselves, because there's no point, when you sit in an airplane and the airplane's about to crash and the mask comes down, they never tell you to take the mask and to put it on someone else. You have to put it on yourself first. So this is about realizing that it's necessary, for our growth, sometimes to get help, to realize there's nothing wrong with us, but we need to grow, and we need to perhaps change those toxic patterns, and that there is hope. There is hope for us to change and to live a fuller life. So hopefully, I hope this talk has, helped people to realize that. And, if anybody needs help, just to reach out, like you said, whether that is to a professional person, whether it is to, a spiritual leader, to community members, to family, to friends. Just remember, you're not alone. Okay, there'll always be someone there for you, and just always remember that.
Like, I actually make a joke now. I'll just say, I just want to date someone that has the same wounding as damage as me. Just like equal, like we're equal on it, like no more, no less. And I think that's what it's about. Like in our relationships, for us to look at ourselves is probably the hardest thing in the world, but also everything's a mirror. So when I'm dealing with damaged people, it's because if I'm understanding where they're coming from, it's because I also feel that there's something that's unhealed within me that I'm trying to heal through them, which also isn't fair. Do you know what I mean? Like you want a partner, you don't want a project. You want someone that is there for you. Like, I could think of nothing worse than dating someone trying to fix me and tell me that there's something wrong with me every day. Like, I would go insane. Like, I'd be like, leave me alone. So I think that's the one thing that you put very, very well, is that our expectations on our relationships are huge. Like, I've also learned that your partner doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to be your therapist, your business partner. Some people, when you get home, they don't want to talk about the worst day that you've had. They want to laugh and have a glass of wine and move on. And yeah, I hope that everyone that has been listening has enjoyed this talk. And at the end of the video, I will put down both of our details if you want to get in contact. And yeah, everyone, just like, if you have a family member or a friend or anyone that is going through anything, share the video, allow them to listen, absorb, reach out. And yeah, we're here. And I hope everyone has a beautiful, beautiful month, year. Like, I know 2020 has been a roller coaster, but we also get to make changes, even if they're small. We get to start to heal, we get to stop hurting, we get to close our toxic cycles, and we get to ask for help. And yeah, thank you so much, Illeana. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Always a blessing and a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jennifer.
Such a pleasure. Cheers. Bye.